I need to know if you are serious about us. Yeah, baby, your love is cold, but I don't feel the trust. Something's not adding up. What you been up to? Drinking all night. Who's that right by your side? Why don't you tell me now? Oh, why you calling me late at night?
A lot like many other young black men, I grew up in a fatherless household. You see, my dad was a businessman, a well-known entrepreneur. And when he and my mom married, they were deep in love. However, Dad had one freaking problem. He just couldn't keep it in his pants. And it led to the two of them becoming divorced. Now, my mother, being bitter and brokenhearted, decided the best way to hurt my dad was to use me as a weapon. And that severed any real chance of him and I having a father and son relationship. Now, I don't resent either one of them. I understand that they're just people and people make mistakes. But it took me a long time to get to that place. And a lot of therapy. You see, growing up in the hood is hard enough. But being an angry kid growing up in the hood because you don't know who your father is, and because your mom doesn't make enough money to keep the water running, so you have to carry buckets of water from your neighbor's house to put in the bathtub, to take a bath, you have holes in your floor and there's no food in the refrigerator. That shit, combined with anger, leads to violence. And boy, did I partake in my fair share of violence. Now, it wasn't until I became older, joined the church, and befriended a pastor that I realized what was going on with me and my family. And this all came out when I was going through my premarital counseling. You see, the pastor sat me down and we talked about my family. We talked about my upbringing, my dad, my mom, the conditions in which I grew up in, and a lot of the things that I did as a young man coming up. And it was this pastor that brought to my attention that my family was experiencing a generational curse and probably had a demonic spirit that someone picked up generations ago that had been following the bloodline. During this conversation, we got really deep into infidelity. How my grandfather cheated on my grandmother and they got divorced. How my father cheated on my mother and they ended up being divorced. And pastor was pointing out to me that I needed to fight this at all costs. But I need you to keep in mind, this was just premarital counseling. I had not married my wife, and I had no intentions of cheating on my wife once we got married. Time passes. My wife and I get married, move into an apartment complex, and start building our life. But as my family grows, and I have my first son, I find it harder and harder to be faithful to my wife. And by the time I had my second son, the situation only got worse. And what I mean by worst is that I had gotten good, excellent at cheating on my wife. I had developed specific means of communications with certain women that would never, ever be traced. Now, admittedly, there were some times that she snooped through my cell phone and she found a few messages here and there, but it was nothing concrete. So my wife had no choice but to let it go and move forward. Now, as I sit here telling you the story, I'm not proud of this at all. This is not me being braggadocious. Life is not some movie where you have all these women. This was a real problem for me. And for those of you men who are listening, and you may be cheating on your wife, I need you to understand some things. It costs you a lot to do this. First of all, it costs you money to do it. Then it costs you time to do it. And time is equal to money, so it's costing you more money. Then on top of that, it costs you the worry of getting caught. And I'll tell you, that was the most significant thing about cheating on my wife. I was constantly worried about her catching me. And because of all the money I was spending running the streets, it started to have a major effect on my household. My mortgage started to fall behind, car notes falling behind. It got to the point to where my son was about to be kicked out of school because I couldn't pay his tuition. And that's why I say to you, cheating on your wife is expensive. Now, don't get me wrong. If you were looking at my family from the outside and didn't know what was going on behind closed doors, you would have never, ever known that I was having a problem. Again, I told you I had gotten good at cheating on my wife. The problem was, it was all starting to catch up with me. And just as things were spiraling out of control, I had the weirdest, craziest intervention I've ever seen in my life. It's a Friday. I make plans to hang out with one of my childhood friends Friday night. I start calling his cell phone. Homeboy is off the radar. Now for him, this is strange, extremely strange, because he always communicates. He doesn't answer the phone Friday night. He doesn't answer the phone Saturday all day. By Saturday night, I'm spazzing out and I'm put on all black. I hop in a car and I'm headed to his crib. I get to this man's house at about 10:30 at night, and he's sitting outside smoking a cigar and reading the Bible. And I'm like, yo, you no good motherfucker. I've been calling you for the past 24 hours. The least you could do is answer your fucking phone. Now we're outside of his house in the middle of the night arguing back and forth. He reaches into his pocket, pulls out his cell phone. The screen is cracked and it's blank. He looks me square in my eyes and says, bro, my cell phone broke. I don't have a home phone, so I just figured I would chill out, smoke, and relax. Once everything settles down and it's all good, he and I get an opportunity to have one of those rare conversations. And what I mean by rare is there's certain conversations you shouldn't have with your friends on a cell phone. I was able to fill him in on a whole bunch of stuff that was going on in my life, and he was able to fill me in on a whole bunch of stuff that was going on in his life. I was sitting there telling him about my business and how it was going and a few of the new enemies that I had acquired, when he says, hey man, you really need to be careful and sit your ass still. Running these streets and chasing these women is costing you too much money. And on top of that, it's a strategic weakness that somebody could exploit. Now pause for a second. I need you to make a mental note here. This friend of mine is a stable genius. Anytime I've ever had an enemy that approached me or tried to hurt or harm me in any way, this is the guy that I would turn to. And he's destroyed more people with a cell phone, computer, and a pen than anybody that I know. And when you sit down and talk to him, it's almost as if he looks through you and sees into your soul. Frankly, I'm happy he's my friend and not my enemy. He goes on to say, listen, man, we all got demons in our life, things that attach to us and follow us. He goes on to tell me, you have a promiscuous spirit attached to you. And if anyone is smart enough, they'll use it to destroy you. Now picture this. Homeboy is not even looking at me while he's talking to me. He's leaned back in a chair, his head tilted up, blowing smoke up into the air. He goes on to say, if I wanted to destroy you, I would find a woman that was perfect for you. Give her some eyeglasses with a video camera and record everything you do with her. And then I would just put it out to the public. Smoke was still rising up in the air when he said that would be my first attack. Then once I had your family life out of order, I would attack your business. And once your business was out of order, after your wife left you, you would spin out of control, and that's when I would kill you. Now listen, I've known this man my entire life. I know what he's done, I know what he's capable of doing, and I know what lines he won't cross. But in that moment, I felt as if he was plotting to kill me. So I had to let it be known. Yo, listen, bro, what you been thinking about doing this to me or something? That's when he sits up and looks at me and says, no, I wasn't thinking about doing that to you at all. It was just a thought that popped into my mind while we were talking. And he goes on to tell me, since that was the weakness that popped into his mind, that was the weakness that we needed to defend against. Remember I told you this guy was a stable genius? He had taken everything I told him within that hour conversation, processed it like a supercomputer. And when I tell you I told him a lot of stuff that I won't repeat, I told him a lot of stuff. He processed it all and found the single most important weakness and then warned me about it. After that, he said, listen, bro, I'm getting tired. I need to go inside and get me some rest. We stand up, hug, and go our own separate ways. Now I'm in a car riding home, right? And have you ever had like a thought in the back of your mind, like someone took a piece of paper and stapled it to the back of your head with a message written on it? That's how I felt on the way home. So I stopped by a barroom and got me a drink or two. By the time I had gotten in the car again, I forgot what he told me and I was back on my cell phone dialing one of my side chicks. She and I talked for a few minutes and made plans to catch up the following weekend. Now listen to this. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Thursday night, I go out hanging with my partners, have a few drinks. I come home early because I know Saturday night I'm supposed to be hanging out with this chick. So I wanted to get a little time in with my wife so she won't be complaining about Saturday. When I get home, she's in bed asleep. So I hop in the shower, crawl in the bed and spoon her, right? Now, if you're in my bedroom and you're facing my bed, I'm laying on the left-hand side of the bed on my left side, which means my back is facing the wall, and I fall asleep. And I can't tell you when this dream started and when it turned to reality and stopped. All I can tell you is sometime during the night, I started to hear what sounded like a woman brushing her hair. And if you've ever been in a quiet...
Again, Dark Waters gives you one of the most engaging true horror stories in the world. If you want to hear more, head over to IamDarkWaters.com and become a member. For those of you who will bitch and moan, realize that your membership to IamDarkWaters.com costs less than a cup of Starbucks coffee. Stop being cheap, show your support. We already know that Google is evil and they own YouTube. Support Dark Waters, the only truly independent horror narrator in the industry. Go to IamDarkWaters.com today.